Hey everybody, this is Way to Fail with another Kerbal Space Program career-ish mode video, where today we're going to be taking on two specific missions here, because why do just one when we can do two? The first that we're going to do is to try and launch a probe orbiter around the moon, and then the second one is see if we can actually have a manned space flight. And my budget goals for this one, actually for the moon one, was going to be 15,000, but it looks like from the design here I may have totally undershot that entirely. If this is something that theoretically can make it to the moon just by switching a few parts, specifically the T200 fuel tank, thanks Jebediah for your junkyard for that, and switching engines over to the LV909 instead of using the LV-T45. So cheaper, more fuel efficient, lighter, and I've also included some rechargeable batteries to go along with my solar panels. So I hope that is going to be enough. We're going to do a test flight here to find out. This is $7,000. This is 7,000 monies. I'm not sure what the unit of currency the Kerbals use. Maybe that's something that someone else knows a little better than me. But this is just going to be a probe orbiter. So all we're trying to do is to get to the moon. Alright, so here we are launching at night on the Kerbal space pad. You can see that with my solid boosters now set appropriately that this shouldn't be too much of an issue. I don't have a teeter-tottering ship anymore. So theoretically this ship gets about 6,000 delta V. That should be enough to get us into space and get us to the moon. But the moon's position right now is not ideal for what we're trying to do. So I'm going to have to circularize an orbit and hopefully not screw it up too much. So we're going to let the solid boosters do a lot of work here. As you can see, that's exactly what they do. I don't actually have any dorsal fins. I'm just relying on the even of the burn to do this. And because Kerbal Space Program doesn't currently have anything resembling wind in here right now, I don't have to worry for anything except for the common burn. If this were real life, I would need some other guidance system perhaps. Because you can see the wind resistance blowing off up there, but right away it's gonna be pretty good launch as my velocity is just massive right now. You can see something snapping up there. I hope that's not my communication array. It looks like it could be though. So we are at 13,000 kilometers. We're just going to go ahead and do our gravity turn, try and make it 90 degrees. If I did snap the communications, that's going to be a really big problem for the mission, actually. It does look like, in fact, that the communication array is gone. So that's something that I would like to have to actually be able to communicate, but instead it looks like we're going to have to use the probe's remote built-in communication. So design flaw right there, broken part on the ship as the communication store is gone. I was really hoping that would stick around. But for now, the apoapse, it's currently moving away ever so slowly. This is going to be a longer burn. So we want to try and raise our trajectory just a little bit here. So we want it to be 26. This is going to take a little bit of time, but eventually we are going to be able to go up to a low Kerbal orbit because we are burning as much fuel as we can, but this is a much more efficient rocket. You can see that my fuel, my oxidizer is all doing pretty okay. Like I said, right now the bigger issue is just that we're not gaining a ton of altitude right now. And I almost wonder if we are in fact going to be able to get up here just a little bit. So let's actually see if we can shoot this rocket just a little bit higher. Because we want to get this apoapsis up to at least 80,000. Because right now we're shooting far away, which is good, but it's not really not the idealist of ideal, but I think we're going to be okay. So what do we got to do now? We have plenty of fuel. We are now in a stable orbit. Now all we got to do is try and set up our moon encounter, and this is where it could take me a little bit of time playing with the nodes here, because you just want to wait until the moon's at about, I believe, the 3 o'clock position. And I believe you want to fire, it would be most efficient actually to fire from the apoapse. But we're going to see if I can do this from right here. We're going to see if this works. There we go, moon encounter. We're about 800 more delta V. And how close can we get to the moon right now? It is going to take about 800 more delta V, so about another maneuver like I did before. it would be more efficient to fire from the direct periapsis and extend this apoapsis, but we're going to still get some benefit of, I don't remember exactly what it's called. Maybe it's the Oberth effect. I do watch some Scott Manley, but I'm no astrophysicist. So let's go ahead and we got to do a 30-second burn. Let's time accelerate around the planet as our probe currently has enough electricity thanks to its battery power. And it is getting some recharging, so there we go. We have a pretty good orbit. And we are just going to be, I guess we're going to be doing a prograde burn, so I need to get that lined up. Let's go ahead and I just want to get the nodes lined a little bit. And if you weren't using maneuver nodes, the old trick used to be that you would just fire towards the moon as soon as it was on the horizon. And that's kind of what it's going to look like here. So 4, 3, 2, 1... And there's the moon on the horizon. I technically could fire right now, and I'd make it, because I'm firing right towards the moon. We're going to follow our maneuver node system and just try and get a good encounter here. So pretty much it's going to just be a few more seconds. There's the moon. That's where hopefully our space program can go in the future with a manned flight. But for now, we've just got to... My goal here is to try and get there with some fuel to spare, because that would be a good proof of concept, especially for a much, much, much better budget ship than what I made before. And it looks like I'm going to have plenty of fuel. And I could actually go for a in-flight adjustment just to, as we have a little bit of a tweak here. Just going to see if I can get the actual encounter by following this, because the target reticule tends to move from time to time. So there we go, and moon encounter. How close are we? Actually closer than the periaps there, so I will take that. I'm not going to tweak it too much. 17,000, and if I adjust one time mid-flight, I may be able to make this even closer. There we go, 10. That's great. So just for 8.6 meters per second right there, a tiny mid-flight adjustment. And you see I kind of have a curly Q little thing here. That's going to get me probably enough to do an aero capture. I don't know for sure. I don't have a ton of fuel to waste, though. So we're going to see if we can get this right the first time. As right now, my ship does have communications online with the Kerbal Space Center, where I'm sure they're telling me eat some crisps or something. But I don't know. I'm on the dark side of the planet. But can I see the Kerbal Space Center from here? There it is, right where the mouse pointer is. Just, it's nighttime for them still on the launch. But on the moon, I just had it in my sights. How do you lose a moon? There it is. So we're just going to fly a little bit closer. So let's go ahead and just fire the engines very slowly, very slightly. And what do we got? A lunar periaps of 19. Ooh, 5,000. That may be a little too much. Maybe just a touch too much. There we go. Let's do about 13. So still good on fuel. Just doing this in real time, I guess you could say. And here we go. There's the moon. There's me flying around very slowly. Wow. So that communications array. I guess because I attached it to these two things to the probe, it just doesn't seem to like accelerating or decelerating. That's so funny. Alright, well, mod parts don't always come with duct tape, I guess. So we're going to go for the aero capture maneuver. Is it going to work? I don't know. But you can see the moon coming. And we already have a pretty tight ring around it. As you can see here, here comes the encounter. If we actually look, you can see the moon getting ever so closer, and our trajectory is about to change in relation to it. Now that's interesting all of a sudden that my maneuvers have changed. But once again, you can see here, I'm already fairly close to a, what you would call, we don't want to do that actually. We're already pretty close to an aero capture. It's not actually going to take too much for me to get it. In fact, I think I may be on a crash course, to be perfectly honest. Oh, well, I guess we're going to find out for science, and if this screws up, at least we're under budget right now. So there we go. Because 10,000, there's some things on the moon that are pretty tall. I just don't want gravity to knock me in, because the moon does have some gravity, but I think I'm going fast enough where it's going to be okay. And you know what? There are many space programs in history that have tried to do something with the moon and just ended up crashing into it instead. So if this periapse looks like it's going to be a problem, we're going to find out in just a second. So let's see, we're getting some gravity capture perhaps, or am I going to overshoot this entirely? Because the thing is that typically with an aero capture move, there needs to be some atmosphere to drag you in. So from the looks of it, so if we're not going to have that, we just need to actually tuck this in. It doesn't have to be a perfect orbit. It doesn't have to be a pretty orbit. But I don't think we're going to have any atmosphere to save us. So let's hear 5-second burn. What was I thinking? Aero capture on a celestial body with no atmosphere. That's just a great recipe to fly on by. So what we're going to do now is we have some fuel left, and we just got to do a 13-second burn. That's going to be a big-ass retrograde burn. And I don't know if it's most efficient to be doing it at the periapse. I'm going to say it is, but I guess I need to keep SAS on just to go. And I apologize if my keyboard's too loud. As you can see, once again, the way my ship's constructed, the stock part, the mod part here is just floating around. But we'll call that a design feature for this. Like I said, I thought I may get the gravity assist with this. As you can see, the atmosphere of the moon, the lack thereof, is not getting me at all. So it's going to be a 13-second burn as we get the features of the moon coming back in. The probe probably has camera equipment somewhere, and we're just going to see. First off, let's see if we're actually going to crash into the planet. We're getting pulled in just a little bit. My periapse... No, we're not. Periapsis is not doing so bad right now. So we're going to do a quick fire as hard as we can. Just in a few seconds, and this may be a successful trip. Could be. I guess we'll know in just a second if it was successful. So let's hear about T-minus 6 seconds. And burn. This is going to be most of the rest of the fuel. As you can see, the camera changing automatically. So let's hear. We're in orbit. And we are slowly coming in just a little bit. Actually burn just a little bit more. Let's go ahead and get rid of that maneuver node. Can bring this in just a little bit more. We have the fuel for it. 20, 18, 16. There we go. Beautiful. There is now a probe from Kerbal around the moon, and it is flying in a really low orbit as well. So pretty good. There is communications established. The MapSat mod is something that I do want to add to this kind of play, but for now I'm having some trouble getting it working with the current version of Kerbal Space Program. So if you have some directions on how to get it to work, that'd be fantastic. But for now, let's go around, and there's a nice shot of actually the dark side of Kerbal, the moon. These are, I believe, like in real life, tidally locked. So Kerbal's going to appear in roughly the same spot of the sky. But yeah, just look at this, just flying around the surface now. Hopefully not crashing. Doesn't look like it. Nope, orbit is stable. No atmosphere to drag in, so we're just going around and around. So mission success for way less than the original budget required, and communications are still in store. So that's good. Here comes the moonrise, or the Kerbal rise and the sunrise. But that's going to be it for this one. Next mission is, I think, with being able to launch something in orbit around the moon, it's time to see if we can get some Kerbals into space for the Kerbal Space Program. And here's the first rocket that's going to bring a Kerbal into space. That's right, we just pretty much took the probe design and smacked a command pod with a parachute on top of it. Didn't really go over budget here either, but Jebediah Kerbal will be the first Kerbal in orbit since the last time that happened, which historically, who knows what Kerbals say in their histories. But otherwise, yeah, it's just a bunch of solid rocket boosters, one rocket, a little bit of fuel. Should be enough to get them up into orbit and back down. So pretty basic stuff here. Just gotta hope we do it right. So next up is gonna be going to the launch pad. And here we go. This is a post-commentary, me going up into the sky. Jebediah looking especially excited for himself. This is at 4 times speed. And you can see pretty quickly that I am flying, I am floating, but I miss stage and I actually almost totally screw up because I wanted to turn a lot sooner, and instead I'm having to pull up here using a lot more fuel than I had originally intended to use or recommended to use. But hey, you know what? The apoapse is going out. I do have plenty of fuel. It does take a lot to escape the atmosphere here, but it looks like I'm going to be able to make it. Just a pretty good stretch of stuff. So Jebediah, you're supposed to be a better pilot than this, but this is definitely user error. I could have had a much more stable orbit, maybe even by this point, but there's the apoapse going out. I am going to be shooting for about 100 kilometers from each way just to get us out very far. So just using the maneuver node, trying to get that all in order. Just a little bit of tweaking here and there. But yeah, out in space, it's a lovely place. So it shouldn't be too long on the burn as I'm looking at my fuel gauge and saying, uh-oh, this is going to be another really close one in terms of whether or not we can get up there and get back. I really hope I don't have to do a rescue mission for Jeb, but if I do, I guess. That would be a... thank God we're under budget because we can send a rescue vessel up there, although that'll be some EVA and docking fund, or docking fund. Probably not docking, but at least some EVA fund that I wasn't originally intending to do. But there we go. Get a pretty stable orbit with just a tiny sliver of fuel left. Now, I'm going ahead and setting up my maneuver node for a aero capture re-entry. But I do just want to mention here that I am keeping Jeb up here in orbit for a little bit to, hypothetically in my mind, at least what they used to do in NASA, was have people conduct all kinds of science experiments up in space. And fortunately in update 2.22, that is what they're going to be including in functionality for this, is actually allowing you to do science missions in space, including R&D. So that's something that I'm looking forward to incorporating into this pseudo career mode matchup. But for now, I've let them do 1 orbit for Kerbal kind, and now I'm just doing a quick little retrograde burn to get my trajectory back down. As thank goodness the batteries are keeping me afloat and a hold. So I am now sinking ever so slowly as we see the nice sunrise over Kerbal, the planet Carbon. Unfortunately, I do start to run into one issue that I really do not like, which is when I jettison my pod, you can see my nav ball going crazy. That's because anytime I turn on the SAS for this, the pod starts shaking like crazy without the pod there, or without the rest of the ship on there. And I have, because I'm using a mouse and keyboard controls, a lot of problems actually controlling where the nav ball goes. So it's a little painful for me to watch again, but it's better than the jittery SAS draining my battery because now I have no power sources on the pod, as it's just going to be falling back to Kerbin. And am I going to be anywhere near the Kerbal Space Center? No, but I am going over the interesting land feature that was added in the 0.21 update, I think, which is that little island in the middle of a very large conspicuous circle, but still having trouble stabilizing the orbit, and almost had it, nope. When I say that, meaning I want to keep the back pressed, and it's just a real pain in the ass. There we go. Eventually get it. Takes a little while. We are going to have a nice fiery re-entry. I go ahead in about less than 10,000. Eject my parachute. Or at least that's the plan, at about less than 10,000 altitude. Eject my parachute. There's the fire. And can we see some? Just a little bit from the cockpit. Not too much. So Jebediah coming down a continent away. Oh, technically it's all one pangeological connected continent, but still pretty far away from the Kerbal Space Center. But there's the parachute and everything is going smoothly. We're going to have our first orbit and landing, as you can see the sun briefly in the sky. But yeah, there we go. Just a very simple land return. Don't need to go too complicated with this video. It's just, now that the space program's shown that they can orbit somebody around the planet, and that we can orbit somebody around the moon. Maybe there's other things we can do. So planting one flag in commemoration for this. There is the lovely insignia as Jebediah. What is he going to write here? Essentially, Jeb was here. This is exciting. The first one in orbit, and he gets to do it first. So we're not exactly sure what nation states are around Kerbal, or the planet Kerbin, but right now Jebediah is planting his flag and showing for Kerbal kind that it is possible to touch space and come back to planetfall. So that's going to be it for this episode, as we're going to be getting a stat screen up here in just a second. Let's look at his nice happy cheese and mug. But there we go. Here's your flight stats for this flight. But otherwise, next episode, we're going to have more interesting things to do, more places to go. But for now, here is your budget stats for this episode. This is Way to Fail. See you next time.